I feel like when I talk about the Final Destination franchise, the second one is the most popular answer to me of the people's favorite. Feels like the one that people bring up the most. They bring up the log truck. They bring up the very memorable parts of this movie because I think that it's the one that pops the most. And for good reason too. I think it's the most memorable one probably. It's just more flashy. It has a more iconic kind of opening set piece. The traffic pileup is awesome. It's a lot more flashy than the first one, I think. And it's definitely remembered for the kills because this has some of the best ones and some of the best executed. I'd say this is probably the furthest they get pushed where the boundaries are very much at a secure level. They don't take it too far. They don't go too cartoonish, but they also make them pretty wild. They're insane, they're cringy, but they're not ridiculous or laughable in the way that some of the ones in 3 and 4 are. They're obviously insane and very unfortunate, but like I said, I feel like in especially 3 and 4, they have to convolute their way into having these deaths, and these are just the right amount of fun and relatable cringe that just, makes you nervous. The tension is built correctly. You have these situations that are very possible, very vulnerable, could easily happen in a lot of cases. But I also think that they, in a lot of ways, subvert your expectations when they have these things happen because it's generally not the most obvious method of death that comes to these characters. It's usually the one thing that they weren't paying attention to that slinks its way around and gets you in the end. And that's why this movie is so badass. That's why it's so enjoyable. That's why I think that these are the kills that are remembered the most. It is the most memorable of these movies, I would say. It's sure as hell the one that played on TV the most. I remember watching this movie all the time on TV. This was a top tier movie to watch in 2008 on the Sci-Fi Channel. I feel like everybody thinks of this movie when they drive behind a log truck at this point because that imagery has become so synonymous with Final Destination 2 and even just beyond all that superficial stuff, which that's what you come to this franchise for because you're looking for fun and inventive kills that push boundaries, are exciting. You're looking for that tension and that terror when you come to a Final Destination movie. But, it pops a bit more and it also tries to add a little bit more of the way of rules and lore to Death's design and the way that this whole thing works, which you kind of have to do. It's a really interesting concept, this idea of new life kind of subverting death. That's a good rule to have. It also provides a little bit of hope. The way that you're left with that first movie is that you think they beat it by having them skip the order, only to find out in the end death comes to you anyway. And that's a little bit depressing. I think that there's a bit more stakes in the movie if you feel like they have hope of actually subverting death or a way to potentially evade it, and having this plot device, this new rule introduced that new life could bring about thwarting death because it's, restoring the balance to the design. It just sets up things in a way to where there's a ticking time clock. There's this added tension and pressure of saving this woman, staying alive in the meantime, and avoiding every possible horrible situation that will inevitably happen when you're out in the real world. Obviously, this rule would be later nullified by the existence of Final Destination Bloodlines, which introduces the concept of death coming after people's children because they survived and then they go on to have this bloodline. Death is coming to collect a bloodline that never should have been. But I feel like you gotta hold that more against Bloodline, obviously, because that's the movie, the sequel that is coming subsequently after and is rewriting the rules, rather than Final Destination 2, which was made 20 years before this sequel that writers wouldn't know would undo the rules and just contradict things 2 decades later. But another thing I think makes this sequel stand out as opposed to the rest of the sequels in this franchise and in the context of these movies, it's interesting that we have Clear back. This is the only time that a Final Destination movie has brought a surviving character back. I mean, obviously you have William Bloodworth, Tony Todd, rest in peace, throughout these movies, but he's not a survivor. He's more of the arbiter of death. He's the guy who tells the characters what's going on and gives them the exposition they need to figure things out. I don't really consider him because he's like I said, he's not someone who survived death, but he kind of is the manifestation of it. But I do enjoy when in a horror franchise's continuity they bring back a returning character or survivor. I just like when stories are built that way and you have that level of pulling things forward. Fortunately, like every horror franchise kills off returning characters characters in Survivors, and this one is no exception, but I still appreciate it when they do it, and there's a benefit to bringing her back in this movie. Even though she sort of just gets wasted by the end of the movie, I still like that she brought a level of progression to the story. A franchise like this, and we see this later on, tends to spin its wheels, and having her back, explaining the rules and everything that's going on, cuts down the need to just have a fresh set of characters where they have to figure everything out all over again because they don't know the rules. They don't have to figure out Death's design because she knows it, so just get to the new shit. Can cut down on all that other stuff that we learned before. Whereas the first movie had them slowly figuring this out, the order, ways to potentially evade death, and kind of that ultimate futility that eventually becomes Clear. This movie just gets right to the action, and with Clear's presence, with all of the Poppy deaths and everything, it just feels like it's pure, unadulterated Final Destination. First one walked so that this one could run. Some of my complaints about the movie, like I said, I just don't love it when a character survives only to be killed in the sequel. And the thing is, they don't only just do that to Clear. I kind of hate that they just had Alex die off screen. He got hit by a falling brick in between movies, apparently, which is a little bit ridiculous, but okay, they couldn't get Devon Sawa back. I get it. But I'm not going to pretend that this isn't a movie that I totally dig, though. I find it just so entertaining, so classic. It's very rewatchable. I'd say a lot more rewatchable than the first movie, even though I do like that first movie quite a bit. I also think that it nails a lot of the practicality with these deaths that the CGI starts to take over in the subsequent movies. But it's just in general exciting. It's so solid, and just roundabout just continues to build off of the strength of that first one and take it to new territory in this second movie. It's hard to find and criticize parts about this movie because I like it so much, because it's so entertaining. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Final Destination 2. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.